This video is for Stipple Wild, so if you're trying to do this in Stipple, you're not going to be able to do it. So if you want to try Stipple Wild, just contact me through Instagram. So I'm going to launch Stipple Wild, and in this video, I'm going to go over the new fill button, which won't always be called the new fill button, but that's what it's being called right now. So I'm going to go start drawing, and just by default. So just to show you the basics of the fill, I'm going to open up the image menu, and I'm going to deselect draw image. And what that does is it's just now we're just drawing dots that aren't being controlled by anything. So I'm going to increase the dot size just for the sake of this. And all right, so I'm going to click the fill button up at the top. And you're gonna have to relearn fill because it's not the same as the old fill. The old fill is still available with this slider and the button, the thin button here, and then this the drop down for grid, hex, random grid, and random hex. These options are still available. However, the new fill is the tool we're going to be talking about now. So, just to start, I'm going to put the columns. I'm going to leave grid at grid. I'm going to leave the grid option at grid. And for columns, I'm going to put in 10. And what this is going to do is it's going to make rows down the screen, and there's going to be 10 columns or 10 dots per row. So watch what happens. So now it evenly spaces these it evenly spaces the dots. That's because of the grid option. And you'll see that there's 10 dots on each row. And to show you by contrast, if I put in 5 dots, hit new fill, you'll see there's 5 dots. We can put in 50 dots, and this whole screen goes black because the whole screen is now filled with dots. So now if we were to make the dots smaller and do it, you'll see that we have rows of 50 dots. Now let's go back up to the top where it says grid, and we're going to switch to hex. And you'll see that now the dots are offset. Or the each even row of dots is offset by a half value, by a half grid value. I don't know what I'm saying. So then below that we have by coverage. And if you're trying to change by coverage and you're saying, like, I put in a giant value in by coverage, but nothing seems to be changing anything, that's because the checkbox isn't on. And you don't want to put in the number 1000 in by coverage, or you're going to be waiting for quite a long time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put 100 in the coverage, because this will demonstrate what coverage is in reference to. So now I'm going to make a medium-sized dot. And what by coverage will do is these dots are roughly touching each other. It's not perfect because it's still going by the number of grid, and that's not going to work out evenly to the screen. I'm going to work on this. But anyway, by coverage basically means that the rows of dots, each row or each dot within the row is roughly touching its neighboring dot. So to show you a little bit more, if I put that at 50, now there should be roughly a dot in between. In this case, it's not working out evenly. It's just because of the dot size I have. It all kind of gets rounded, so sometimes the values don't round quite evenly, or quite as you'd expect them to. I'm going to work on that and make the distance in between dots more consistent. But in the meantime, so now if you're used to the old fill, you know that brush size and density make a difference. They don't make a difference to the new fill. New fill doesn't care about that. To demonstrate, but dot size matters and jitter matters. So watch what happens with a hex pattern with a random jitter. You'll see that now, let's do that again. You'll see that now they're all offset. And you can do something similar by using like random grid or random hex you'll get patterns like that. Actually, in terms of random grid and random hex, they do reference the brush size, but whatever. I'm gonna go back to hex, and then let's see. I'll fill this in, and so what nudge does is the it offsets the fill by the value, and that's in reference to pixel values. So let's pick a different dot color. Now you'll see that now these are nudged off a little bit. Now if you want to keep nudging, you do have to keep updating this value to continue to get this nudge effect. Otherwise you'll just hit it and it's going to just overlay exactly what you did. So you do have to keep updating this. It's not streamlined. This was just an idea that Brian had, one of the users, and it was easy enough to implement. All right, so now that gets through the basics. Let's load in a picture, and let's make these dots kind of small, and let's go ahead and give this a shot. Let's make those dots even smaller. Remember that the plus button is going to increase or decrease your dot scale. This might be a good time to experiment with really large dots, and to get that you hit the plus button, and now you're working with big dots. All right, but let's give this a shot. Let's get rid of that background, and let's get a dark background on here. And you can see the stipple S was made. If we want to increase the contrast, we can always do that by making a bigger gap in between your bigger and smaller dots. Okay, now why is this cool? It's pretty cool because now, unlike the old fill, you can put in pretty large numbers. So I'm going to go back to by columns, and I'm going to put in 500. And it's going to take a little bit. But now look at this. It's so tight that we're creating a whole new level of detail. Now, so that shows by column, by coverage. All right, so now you'll see right here where it says dots, and it says 37 or 370,000 dots. Now that's how many dots it attempted to draw. That's not necessarily how many dots got drawn. This slider cuts them out, and if you use a mask and stuff, it'll cut them out some more. By columns is basically just referencing it's just going to show you. So by columns is showing you the value that you had set up there, and then by coverage is showing you the calculated value using those columns. So you'll say, what the hell are you talking about? So you'll see right here where it says by coverage is 62.5 and it says coverage up here is 50. Well, that's because we're not using the coverage setting. Now, if I go ahead and with the coverage setting on at 50, you'll see that when I hit new fill, my coverage right here, once we come back, is going to be set to 50, right? But now it says 400 columns, which doesn't match our column value up here. This is because you're either going by columns or by coverage, and this checkbox determines which one you're going by. And then down here is just showing you the calculated value. So what does this mean to you? It means very little to you, but sometimes you want to remember what settings you used after you use by coverage, and you want to switch to a smaller dot size, but you don't want to adjust your grid. And I might as well just go over that because might as well. And then the time right here is the amount of time that it took your device to process all this. This is in milliseconds, so divide that by 1,000, and 3,317 calculates to about 3 seconds, about 3.3 seconds, right? So keep this in mind. It's almost good to experiment with some safe settings, some lower values, see how long it's taking your phone, and then when you increase the values, and I'm not going to demonstrate this on the video, but you can easily put in too many too many columns or by coverage, keep that too high. If your by coverage is high and your dot size is small, basically it's going to try to cram a ton of dots in every single pixel of your device, of your device's screen. And what that's going to do is it's going to take forever, and your phone, it's going to seem like the device isn't working anymore. And the same can be said for using by columns with a very large dot size, because what's going to happen is it's going to put a bunch of dots down, and dots that at a smaller size the system was able to handle, but at a large size now it has to read, it has to sample all the pixels within that giant dot radius, and that's going to slow down the your system and probably not give you the effects you want. However, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do. So I've left this system completely open-ended, and you can put in whatever values you want. However, be prepared to wait or possibly restart. You might get a message that says this app is taking too long. Do you want to wait? You can wait it out. A lot of times it'll resolve itself. However, this new fill works so fast that if you're going past like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you're probably making a lot of redundant dots, meaning dots that are just on top of themselves. But I'm going to touch back on what I meant before. I'm going to put in a coverage. Let's see. I'll keep the coverage at 5, but I'm going to switch my dot size to much bigger. Oops. Okay. Oops. All right. So now if we were to switch dot sizes, and again, I'm rambling, you can shut this off at this point. This is not all that important, but it is an explanation of why there's by columns and by coverage. So now if we were to switch the dot size, you'll see that now my grid is not going to be aligned anymore. So now my grid got off. But you'll see that down here it says by column 16. So now if I were to do it first with the fill at 50, because that, say, is what you're trying to achieve with your initial dot size, then turn off by coverage and put in 16, and then put in a different color and a smaller dot, and now you'll see that these dots are going to be dead center within the last dots. So that's why, that's one of the reasons why there's this thing right here down at the bottom that's telling you the by coverage and by columns value. It's basically translating those values so you can recreate those values after switching between by coverage and by column. It's also basically all this stuff down here is for me, not for you. It's for me to test this and maybe for you to let me know what values are causing problems. Let me know what cool effects are. You can start playing around with different masks and stuff, and sometimes you'll think like, oh, if I add a mask, it's going to slow down the system. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes adding a mask actually increases or decreases the amount of time spent waiting because it doesn't have to draw as many dots, which that might be intuitive to you too. It wasn't intuitive to me. Sometimes you'll see that using draw is slower than using color and stuff like that, and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily expect. But I will talk about a few key differences between the new fill and the old fill. The old fill will respect auto threshold. The new fill does not respect auto threshold. It uses a completely different way to fill the screen up with dots, so it's no longer touching upon, like, the old fill basically replicated finger presses within a grid determined by this slider, but it no longer does that. It basically treats the whole screen like one giant brush radius and then just fills in with dots, whether it's in the coherent grid or with the random grid. So also the new fill doesn't work with the eraser or the draw tool just yet. So if you want to play with those things, you still have to use the old fill. However, you don't need to use those effects anymore, because now you could just make bigger dot sizes that used the clear blend mode if you wanted to recreate the eraser effect, or you could just use a bigger dot size with just use a bigger dot size. It's basically recreating what pencil used to do, uh, or what it used to do when you cranked brush size and density down. It's just recreating that. So if you wanted to do what pencil used to do, you would just shut off the draw image and just hit go. And this is exactly what the pencil used to do. Let's see if I can, if that's actually true. No, because the pencil goes by brush size. But same difference, right? I can get this. I can get the same dots, I guess. Oh, huh? Well, something went wrong. Um, oh, because that's on. That's why. All right. Oh, okay. All right. So I can get similar dots as I could with the pencil. And as I said, with the erasers, the same thing. I can just put clear dots on and make the dot size bigger, and all these will disappear. So let's see. I've already gone way longer than I should have. Um, Experiment, play with the new dot shapes. I'm gonna explain that stuff in the next video, so I didn't want to touch upon it in this one. Um, all right, thanks for using. Let me know what settings are cool.